Hey everyone, welcome to session number 6. We're going to talk about a very technical concept called burner domains and inbox warming, something that a lot of individuals forget to do. So let's jump into it. Hopefully, you'll find a lot of value in this session. All right, so this agenda for this session, it's not going to be very long. We're going to be talking about burner domains and emails, what they are and how to configure them, setting up the appropriate DNS records, and what email warmup is. All right, let's proceed. All right, burner domains. Burner domains is a fairly newer concept, I would say, in cold outreach. It's essentially what I call sometimes a secondary domain. So let's say your main domain is growthrhino.com or growthuniversity.io. You generally want to preserve that for your email marketing initiatives, right? If you're doing a lot of cold email outreach, you're naturally going to hit a lot of different roadblocks and a lot of different individuals who are going to mark you as spam. So what you want to be doing is setting up something called burner domains or secondary domains, right? So again, if my domain is growthrhino.com, you'd want to set up growthrhino.co, .io, .ca, or if you're doing a SaaS company, you do try GrowthRhino, or if you're doing like an app, like a mobile app, you can do GrowthRhino app, right? There's a lot of different variations. I would recommend you buy 2 or 3 of them, even keep them for its general outreach and set them up appropriately, right? But you do not want to be using your main domain for individual outreach. Again, consideration is if you're planning to go scale this initiative out. If you plan to send out a few hundred emails here and there, sure, use your main domain. But if you're trying to do anything beyond that, really get into the practice of setting up a burner domain, right? Um, just some housekeeping items. It is recommended that each domain you have only set up 5 email addresses, which we'll talk about. It's also that you set it. It's also good that you set up the appropriate redirects. So if anybody visits your burner domain, it actually goes to the actual domain. So if anybody visits growthrhino.io, it'll automatically redirect to growthrhino.com, right? And then the last but not least is we have to make sure that you do some authentication and DNS records, which is on the next slide. But before I begin, one of the things I get asked is like, hey, what type of domain should I be buying? Like I said in the previous slide, like you want to keep it as close as possible to your main, like brand name or app name or whichever. You don't want to make it something too far-fetched, and the typical endings, the TLDs as they're called, you want to stick to the basics: .co, .com, .org, .net. I would maybe .io because and .ai because it's becoming more popular, but those are generally also more expensive. I wouldn't go and purchase like .biz, .ind or whichever, right? So just a quick tidbit or tidbit there. So there's this thing called authentication on each domain, and you have to do something called SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Um, I'm not going to get into this specifically because there's a lot of great resources online. I just want to make sure you're aware of it. A lot of individuals off the bat don't set this up. This is what it looks like. This is what growthrhino.co looks like from the back end. You have to go into your, I guess, your wherever you purchase the domain, whether it's GoDaddy, Namecheap, Google Domains, and go into your advanced DNS settings. If you're really confused about this, don't go and tinker around with this too much. There's a lot of productized services out there that can do it. This is really just a 2 to 3 minute activity, but you just want to be careful when you're playing around with anything, right? It's usually just a copy paste of some text items, right? But this is generally what it is. And again, each of these like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC have their own, I guess, respective definitions and respective requirements. But what you need to know is that we need to set this up because this will tell anyone that you're emailing from the burner domain that this is a legitimate domain, it's secure, there's nothing fishy about it, or quote unquote, right? There's a great YouTube tutorial, I think it's like 5-6 minutes only, on how you can set these things up. So I would recommend you do that. SPF is usually set up automatically when you set up your G Suite records, right? Again, there's a lot of great documentation out there, so make sure you go and you look it up. And like, I'd recommend just going to YouTube and making sure you understand where to go. Once you get the slides, you'll be able to play this video. Okay, let's talk about burner emails. So once you've set up your burner domains, you want to set up the respective emails, right? So what I recommend is set up to only 5 addresses each on each domain. And that you also recommend you only use G Suite. There's a bunch of other tools out there. You can do Microsoft Outlook, which is also called Office 365. You can use GoDaddy's thing, Namecheap's own email dedicated servers. My recommendation is just to use G Suite. It's $5 a month, and or I think maybe six they would have increased it, but per email address. But it's probably the most advanced and most secure, and like a lot of other servers kind of recognize it. So that's what we do. We set up about I don't know, about 10, 15 email addresses per client that comes on board in Growth Rhino. So if you want to know what professionals do, this is what we do, right? Just for your own reference, like a Gmail inbox has a limit of 2,000 emails per day, which is more than plentiful to carry out your respective outbound. What you want to be doing also as a best practice is setting up a necessary auto forward. So, what you naturally, if you have 12, 15 inboxes and if somebody responds back, you would want to auto forward it to at least one main email, right? What I also recommend if you're planning to do that is make sure you set up the respective filtering. Depending on what you want to filter out, like let's say you want to filter out blocked messages, you want to filter out the bounce messages or whichever, you can set up an auto forward that way. One thing what we do is we set up an auto forward to go everything to Slack. So we have one channel that where all the emails come in there, and then we can filter it out accordingly. The other thing you probably want to be doing is setting up an email client like Apple Mail, Thunderbird, Shift, whichever ones you want to kind of utilize. That way, you don't have to log into like your 12 email accounts or 5 email accounts each time. It's like you can fire up a desktop app and then you can log into these respective burner emails, right? Then you need to figure out like how to send over any interested responses between your burners and your actual domain, which in some cases could be as easy as just forwarding it to yourself and then just to your actual main email and then picking up the conversation, right? But the reason we do all of this, like burner domains and burner emails, is eventually like when we want to scale this channel, we need to understand, okay, fine, like how many individuals do I want to do outreach towards, right? So based on the number of people you want to do the respective outreach for, you can say, okay, fine, I need this many domains and this many emails, right? And alternatively, it's also a great way to scale this channel up and down, right? So for instance, if I know that I have to send out 20,000 prospects, send email out to 20,000 people per week, based on my calculations, I'd probably need something like 10 email accounts spread across, 3, 4 domains, right? Or 2 domains, right? It's really up to you to decide how you want to do it. But at least this way you can do some calculations and purchase and set up the respective tools, okay? One thing I want to note is that running an operation like this does have a monthly recurring cost. Obviously, you're purchasing like a cold email platform, you're purchasing all these domains, you're buying all these inboxes. It is fairly nominal when you compare it to like ad spend or any of these other initiatives. But I just want to flag that like, okay, try to budget for at least a few $100s. Like if you're thinking about like how much a typical domain, you're looking at about spending $10 to $15 for a domain for the year, $5 per inbox. So if you do the math, like, okay, if I'm going to be managing 10 inboxes, that's $50 just on inboxes per month. Plus, depending on what type of setup you have on the cold email platform, some of the platforms charge you per email account, or they might charge you per additional email within the same license. You need to check with with that respective platform, right? So you could go anywhere between $500 to $1,000 when you're a fully scaled up engine on something like this, right? If you're just starting out, then that's not something you need to worry about. Maybe just buy one domain, one burner email, and one cold email platform license, and then you're off to the races. Okay, so just something to consider. But later on, when you do want to scale, you can think about how to do the respective mathematics. Another concept that's fairly new is this whole idea of inbox warming. We've seen a plethora of tools come out there as well for this, but essentially inbox warming is this practice of sending emails to a closed community to show that your inbox has a certain amount of activity, right? Um, for instance, if you're to go buy an email today and start sending out 1,000 emails per day, obviously you're allowed to do that because you have a quota of 2,000 on Gmail. Um, the Gmail servers will know that this individual is a spammer and using a lot of automation. So what you want to be doing is warming up. What that means is you want to be sending out a few emails per day. Let's say you start off at 10 a day, then you go 15 a day, then you go 20 a day, like that. You want to slowly build it up. It's kind of to replicate or emulate human activity, right? Um, so naturally, when you start sending, it's zero. Um, and then you're growing up by a small percentage here and there. There's a bunch of tools out there now that have kind of automated this process, so you don't have to. So generally, what we do is we try to set up the inboxes 2 weeks ahead of before we kick off the first campaign, and just let the warm up process start. Right. Um, this is super helpful. We use a tool internally called Warm Up Your Inbox. Again, not affiliated. We've just been utilizing them for the last few months or so. They're very cost effective. I think it's like $6 or $7 per inbox. So it becomes very effective as you need to scale out your outreach efforts, right? So highly recommend you look into someone like them. But there's a bunch of other tools that are out there. Just find something that fits your budget. One thing I will say is that once you start up a warm up process, you're going to start getting all these like gibberish emails in your inbox. So please make sure you set up the respective rules for archiving and forwarding and all of that type of stuff within your G Suite ecosystem, um, so that way your primary inbox doesn't get flooded. Okay, so again, there's a lot of great literature out there to do that. If any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to also point you in the right direction. But all these inbox warm up inbox tools have that documentation in their tool. All right, that's it for this lesson, and I will see you in the next one. All right, take care.